A very warm good afternoon to everyone present here for the talk organized by the Economics Department along with the Economics Forum and Oikonomika on revisiting the birth of economics from ancient to modern thought by Dr. Niharika Singh. The duty vested in me is to be your MC for the afternoon. Kindly keep your microphones on mute and your cameras off to avoid any disturbances. The questions you have can be put in the chat box on Meet, and if you're on YouTube, use the live chat option. And please keep in mind that the feedback forms will be sent to you only after the talk ends. So kindly refrain from asking questions about the same during the talk. Thank you. I take this opportunity to welcome the speaker, Dr. Niharika Singh, Assistant Professor, Symbiosis School of Economics, Pune. I welcome the delegates across India, both from college as well as from outside, and all the faculty members. I welcome every student here who is eager to learn, and I hope we all learn something new here this afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome the organizing committee of this event, Professor Clement, Vice Principal, Professor Anita, HOD of the Economics Department, Professor Keshav Murthy, Coordinator of the Economics Forum, Ms. Teresa Joy, Coordinator of Oikonomika, Ms. Anne Francis, Ms. Raisa, Dr. Nikhil, Dr. Tulika, and Dr. Padmaja. Welcome, professors. I welcome the faculty present here from both Josephs as well as from outside. Last but not the least, I welcome every student, the organizing committee members, and the student organizing committee members. Welcome, everyone. Now I invite Professor Anita, the HOD of the Economics Department, to introduce the speaker for today's talk. Anita ma'am, kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this national webinar on the topic Revisiting the Birth of Economics from Ancient to Modern Thought. We have had an overwhelming response during the past 3 days with nearly 512 registrations from across India. And I'm really overwhelmed by this response, and I would like to say thank you so much for this overwhelming response. It gives me immense pleasure this afternoon to introduce the speaker, Dr. Niharika Singh, Assistant Professor, Symbiosis School of Economics, Pune. Dr. Singh has completed her PhD in Economics from Banastali University, Rajasthan, and her areas of interest include economic thought, political economy, and labor economics. She was a faculty in our very own college and our very own Department of Economics during the year 2012-2013. Dr. Niharika has various publications in national and international journals. To name a few of her publications, an analysis of labor migration from Bimaru states of India, policies to reduce inequalities, women's role in the unorganized sector of Rajasthan, discrimination against immigrants in the unorganized sector of Rajasthan. So she has worked a lot on gender and economics, as you see through her publications. Dr. Niharika will be talking on a very interesting topic this afternoon, trying to trace back the evolution of various economic theories over the centuries. And she's really working hard now with the trend, with the economics becoming more numerical and quantitative in nature. We tend to forget a lot that economics relies a lot on theoretical implications rather than just numericals. So she is working very hard to revive this area which is forgotten, but surely we should not be forgetting this area. So on behalf of the principal, Reverend Father Dr. Victor Lobo S.J., and all my colleagues at the Department of Economics, a very warm welcome to you, Dr. Niharika Singh, and to all the delegates who are a part of this webinar. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and it's a pleasure to have you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita ma'am. I request Dr. Niharika Singh to begin her talk. Ma'am.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Anita ma'am, for inviting me for this talk. And it is uh, indeed an honor to be here, part of St. Joseph's again. I have taught, like Anita ma'am said, that I was part of the college of the department in 2012 and 13. And I feel very happy to be back over here. I know some of my colleagues are here, senior professors are here, and I feel very happy to present my views. Now, why I have chosen this topic, or why Anita ma'am has chosen this topic, like she already said, that this is an area which is being slowly, it's out of it's being outdated and it's being forgotten with the emergence of a lot of numerical methods, a lot of data centric analysis, a lot of artificial intelligence coming up, and most of the labor intensive industries becoming more mechanical in nature, more capital intensive in nature. We are forgetting the kind of human touch that economics needs, the kind of human psychology, the kind of human thought behavior that this whole subject depends upon. I will try. I will not say that I am somebody like Plato or Aristotle or somebody, a Greek philosopher, but I am trying to trace back and trying to revive the old glory of economics. With this, I would like to share the PPT that I have made, and with this, I will try to emphasize upon a couple of points. Please bear with me for a second. It'll just start now. All right. So this is the history of economic thought that we are talking about, how it all started. Now, one thing that we need to understand, we have been using two very different terms in substitution to the other. One is economic history. We often tend to also use history of economic thought, or try to substitute history of economic thought by economic history. There's a difference between the two. Now, economic history, if you trace back, relates to the concept of history of economic activities, which are various economic activities like lending, spending, industrialization, financial institution, institutionalization, and all of that. History of economic thought, if you understand, is something that goes even before the whole concept of economics emerged as a subject. History of economic thought is something that can be traced back not only to the concept or the famous economists that we know, like Adam Smith, the most important or the most referred classical economist, the most ancient in terms of economists that we know is Adam Smith, but it is traced beyond that, beyond even Greek classical economics, Greek classical thought. It goes to ancient Hindu and Hebrew thought. We will understand how. Now, we need to understand why is history of economic thought important. Many of us who have taken economics must have taken economics as a subject because we must have thought that it relates to numbers. It relates to contemporary understanding. And that is why you will find that most of the universities at a global level are doing away with this subject called history of economic thought. But we need to understand this subject because history tends to repeat itself. And from those repetitions, we understand how the trend has been and what else we can do in order to refine or reform the ways that we have undertaken earlier. Now, I would also like to emphasize upon one of the facts that economics in itself is not a subject. You cannot seclude economics and study it. Rather, economics, you will understand, that is always a resultant of its activities, of the activities that surround us. Like, there'll be a lot of social influences, there'll be a lot of political influences, you will see there'll be a lot of historical influences. So many historical events, so many political events, and so many sociological events and structures have led to formulation of various economic policies. The recent, I can give you an example. We all have been learning and reading a lot about the Indo-China conflict. Now, you may have a different view, I don't contradict to that, but the 59 apps which were banned earlier and the later 18 that are banned now, the apps, the Chinese apps, are a resultant of, this can be an economic instance, but they are resultant of a political conflict, right? So this is how we say that history of economic thought or economics as a subject is always understood and studied in a concept of relativity, wherein there are time, places, and conditions which influence economics as a whole. Now, this is a timeline which we generally read, starting from the classical, going to the later classicals like Malthus, Ricardo, Say, and then coming to the socialism, wherein comes Karl Marx. Before Karl Marx, we'll also learn Sismondi. Then Keynes, neoclassical, Milton Friedman, neo-Keynesian, coming to the new classicals. But does economics only limit itself to these famous schools of thought? I think we need to understand more either before or beyond this. So understanding before Adam Smith, I have tried to emphasize what we have learned and how we came to Adam Smith. Because this is a certain framework that is very easily available for any student of economics. A person who wants to learn economics has to go through this timeline, and this is one timeline which is easily available and understood and marked up by all these students of economics. Now let's understand and try and, dig in what happened before Adam Smith to what led to formulation of concepts by Adam Smith. I would like to start with understanding the concepts of ancient Hindu and Hebrew thought. When you understand and learn about the ancient philosophies before Greek philosophy, of course, then you also understand the civilizations which were prevalent at that time. And two very ancient and very profound civilizations which were very contemporary in nature. And also you will find a lot of similarities between these two civilizations in terms of their living, the social structure, the economic thought, their practices, and all the other socio-political instances and behavior and habits. You will find that a lot of them were much before and much ahead of their times. And how even today, I won't say directly, but in some or the other different form, we are trying to inculcate what was there in ancient Hindu and Hebrew times. We all know that ancient Hindu and Hebrew philosophies were based a lot on ethics, moral philosophy, and how we should talk and behave and how a human should behave. You can also relate the same concept of, moral philosophy to later on the concepts that Adam Smith came up with, moral philosophy, moral sentiments. You can then extend it later to the concepts of idealism, which you will find later on how beautifully it gets morphed into realism and then liberalism. How this has changed. These are the basic postulates you need to understand how this all initiated. You will find that these two societies, these two thoughts that we have been talking about, the Hindu and the Hebrew thought, these two civilizations were basically agricultural in nature. They focused more on agriculture and agricultural based rather than trade and international trade and economics. So now there are these various points. The first one, like we know, the Mosaic law, usury. It was vehemently criticized that usury, or which we say the excessive rate of interest, should not be taken. Now, when we say the excessive interest rate, we all know that that some or the other way even prevails now. But you know what? At that time, even the smallest rate of interest was criticized and forbidden. And when I say not encouraged, it meant extremely forbidden, not allowed at all. All the laws, all the Vedas, you will see they have criticized the excessive use or the use of money as a generator of wealth. So money, which you say in real terms, like we say today, money creates money and money can give more money, was vehemently criticized at that time. But you will see that loans on usury was allowed to strangers. Now there you will see a very interesting understanding of boundaries, wherein the Hebrews and the fellow Hebrews were very much in regulation of the state, of the laws followed by the state. But they were also at the same time very much mindful of the fact that strangers cannot abide by the same laws as the citizens. So there were two very different laws on the same concept. For strangers, it was allowed. But then there was this limitation on the strangers as well. It said, thou shalt not demand as a pledge any of thy brother's necessities, which means, like Shylock did, you can't ask for a pound of flesh. And it was very strictly written that you cannot take as a pledge any other fellow's life. So the life of your fellow cannot be taken as pledge. So there were these two very strict rules and laws, even for the strangers, when they were giving money on usury. In Hindus, in ancient Hindus, money lending by the higher caste was strictly prohibited. You will also see that there were various kinds, because we all know that if you come to the Hindu society, the ancient Hindu society, we all know that there were various varnas in ancient Hindu society. And the four varnas, which later on became very stringent and later formed, and we should say, or rather I would use the term, deformed itself into the rigid caste system. The initiation of it was never meant for it to be transformed or deformed into the rigid caste system. The Manusmriti also talks about, the Vedas talk about the four varnas which were based on the occupation. And for them, the later part, you will see the later two, the first Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. These were the four varnas according to the ancient Hindu society. While the first two were supposed to be the higher caste, and they were supposed to protect the interests of the society, rule the society, protect the interest and fight for the nation. The lower two were into business, making what we say now producers, which you will find later on has come up to the concepts of ruling and the ruler in Plato's concept of republics. The republic that he published, in which he talks about the ideal state, and he formulated the concept of ideal state, and he talks about how the society or how the nation should be divided, how the state should be divided. This is how it transformed into later on. So you will see, even then you will find how the higher castes were strictly prohibited from having all the good things, in the sense all the luxury, all the benefits of having more money, all the benefits of having property, individual property, while the other two castes, according to occupation, were allowed for all these parts of generating interest, generating, more importantly, having their own property. You will see they were very ahead of their times, and there were various kinds of interest rates prevalent: compound, stipulated, corporate, daily, and use of pledge. So daily interest rates were also there. You know what? You will find that in the informal institution where the informal money lending is going on, that informal sector of money lending, these kind of interest rates are still prevalent in the society, and very much people nowadays, you'll find if you go to a rural area, people would go and rather take money, or rather like to take money, borrow money from lenders who are probably, give you 1,000 rupees and say that maybe for next 15 days, you're going to give me 50 rupees each, 50 rupees for every day. So although you will not get a very clear concept, or you will not get a very clear understanding why they are doing it, despite banks having so very easily available for interest rates, giving freely, catering to the needs of the poor. But this is the concept that has been going on in the society, and in respect to money lending, it has already always been there. Now, let's not get into the banking concept, because that's a very different area, and we can have a huge number of discussion on that, wherein the banks need a lot of formalities, and these people cannot afford that. Mortgages, which these people cannot afford that, and all of that. Let's go, not get into that. Now, you will also see that both Hindus and Hebrews had careful regulations against false weights and measures, and they were against adulteration. So you will see that we are, in a way talking about the concept of welfare state. There were regulations. There were very strict measures against false weights and adulterations. So people who were involved in businesses, or who were, into the business of producing food grains and lending and all, they were very much regulated by the state. Export of necessary articles was forbidden, completely forbidden, and especially in times of famines, you will see that the laws were very stringent, wherein if there's a famine in the state, in the country, there was no trade or export of necessary articles, especially the food grains, for n number of years, 5 to 10 years, especially at least for 5 years, there was supposed to be no export of articles, or especially food grains. You will see both the Hindus and Hebrews, they believed in the concept of state, wherein we saw that all of these ideas that they have been talking about is being regulated by the state, a very strong central power. For labor and caste, there used to be wage earners. There were wage earners at that time as well. But you will also see that the concept of slaves was always prevalent and present in the society. Wage earners and people who were doing manual laborers, they were always honored by the Hebrews and Hindus. especially in the Hebrew society civilization, you'll feel that the manual laborers were honored and they were given a lot of respect. Now, you will find a very interesting protection of labor's interest in Brahmanic law. The ancient Hindu law, which was of course governed by the Brahmanic law, it made sure that suppose an employer is taking n number of employees, and some employees, for some reason, any personal reason or any other reason, tries to, go, try to leave the job and try to go away from that particular area to a different area, or tries to move or takes a decision to move from one area to another area and leave the job before the contract period of that employment, that labor was supposed to pay for so many months which was left in the contract, the employer. Likewise, and vice versa, you will see that in Brahmanic law, if the employer for some reason terminated the employee from his or her job, the employer was supposed to give the employee the wage for the number of months which were left. So you will see how interestingly, at a very nascent stage, they're talking of benefit or security or social security or security of the job, security of the employment. It's in a very nascent stage in the society, but it's very interesting to understand how people in such an ancient civilization are talking about job security. They're talking about the benefit not only of the labor, not only of the employee, but of the employer as well. Then you will see, because these societies were very much dependent upon agriculture. So both the societies favor agriculture, and you'll see that he that tilleth the soil shall have plenty of bread. So unlike now, like the farmers, the condition of farmers we all know today is miserable. At that time, it was made sure by the state that the farmers were not left at the mercy of the market. They were taken care of. Trade at that time was, you will see, till the time of mercantilism, trade was never ever thought upon as talks of trade and traders as Canaanites. They were always looked down. They were always discouraged. And at times, when protection for the state or protection of its people were talked about, the first thing that was stopped was trade, cross-border trade. A very interesting seventh and Jubilee year concept was followed in the Hebrew thought. Now, seventh year, you will see how this seventh year will be taken as related to the fertility of the land, and you can now link it forward to the concept of diminishing utility. You can understand that what in seventh year rule, the Hebrew society said that a plot of land, if tilled for 6 years, it'll give you a good produce. But for the seventh year, compulsorily you will have to stop the tilling of the land and give the land a rest of 1 year. That is the seventh year. So the seventh year, for the seventh year, this land was completely put to rest. Now, why do you need to put the land to rest? Because at that time, we did not have the concepts of fertilizers, artificial pesticides, and all of that. If you keep on growing land, you would see that the fertility of the land also grows down, the produce goes down, unless you use artificial fertilizers or genetically modified crops. So the Hebrews were quite ahead of their times, and they thought of putting a stop to the tilling of the land for some time. And this, I suppose, had come through some time of tilling and then understanding, and then, the trial and error method, wherein you keep on trying to till a land for so many years, and you see that after every seventh year the produce falls, and then you make a law that the seventh year has to be a rest year for the land so that it regains its fertility, and then you grow it again because you're going to use all the organic products for its fertility. Next, the Jubilee year. The Hebrews thought that all land belongs to the God. And God is the sole king of the land, or sole owner of the land available. So the 50th year, from whomever the land was taken, it used to be returned. You can take the land and sell it and so on, but this is the original person. You sell it to B, you sell it to C, you sell it to D, and so on. But once it reaches the 50th year of it, it again has to send back to the original person. And you will interestingly see that it was the state which always had the most power, or the most, you will understand that majority of the land which was owned by the state, you will find that it is a very interesting concept, that how the land at 50th year always used to go back to the original owner, and then the whole thing began again. This whole concept. So it always kept that motivation on, that it has to come back to me in the 50th year. You will see a very interesting combination of ethics and religion. So ethical religious ideas in Hebrew and Hindu society were very much in combination when it came to ruling the state, when it came to the economic ideas, when it came to how the society or the people should behave. There were a lot of moral concepts into it. Now we come to the Greek thought. It slowly develops. The Greek thought, Plato. We all know that Plato talked about the ideal state. Plato, his famous book, The Republic, he finds the state as the more suitable place to discuss about the morality than an individual, because everything is easier to see in the large than in small. It's very interesting how Plato always tries to see the larger picture and talks about the welfare state. And very interestingly, you will also find Plato goes to the extreme part of welfare and communism, and he talks about the society as a whole, and he says that even the children and the wife should be in common, should not be to an individual, because that again creates an individualistic attitude, and that will probably create conflict in the society. So he goes to an extreme level. We all know that this whole concept, or this whole Greek thought, school of thought, is led by Socrates, who never talked, or who never gave, because his idea of thinking and his idea of teaching was always questioning. So Socrates always encouraged you to question. So this is the sequence: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then the famous Alexander. Now, interestingly, you will find that how all these, although we always encompass them into the same Greek school of thought, are so different from each other. Aristotle, although being a disciple of Plato, is extremely different from what Plato comes up with, the concepts of such as ideal state, such as communism, such as ruling class. There's so many different things that Plato talks about, and Aristotle diverges from that. Plato talks about ideal state, wherein he talks about the state should be responsible for everything. The state should be taking care of its people. The state should be there. There should be ruling class and the ruler class, wherein the ruling class should always be more sacrificing in nature. And Plato also talks about how the ruling class should be segregated from the common people from the beginning, and they should be given and treated a very different, they should be taught in a very different way, so that the ruling class is different. Now, like we see nowadays, I can relate it probably to the concepts of defense forces. If the military is going to defend you, it needs very different concepts and very different ways of living than the common people. I can also give you a very interesting and how it has come to the modern part and why they did that. We all see, like Plato also related the military and the ruling class should be different from the ruler class. Okay, so these people who are going to be ruled and the people who will rule have to be segregated, and both of them will have different kinds of education in the society. Then you talk about the ancient methodology, wherein these people, the people who are going to rule, are going to be taught in a different way. Plato always talked about the king has to be a wise king, a philosopher king. The concept of a philosopher king was always there in Plato's ideal state. Whereas the military class was always supposed to be the one who was fighting and defending your area, defending your state. When I say, maybe you can relate it to it, this concept, there was lots of hunting in the military class. They were taught to hunt. Even the ruling class, the rulers at that time. Not according to Plato, because Plato's ideal state would have been a philosopher king who was very wise, but never took part into the fightings and extension of his territories. But generally, the king, like even Alexander, you will see, he participated in all the wars himself. So this hunting, you know why people were taught hunting from beginning? Maybe because these people who are going to defend your state should not be intimidated by blood, should not be intimidated by killing fellow human beings. So that training started in form of hunting, wherein you're killing a living thing and you become immune to the emotions of the living being. You keep on killing the living being, thinking that either the living being is going to attack you or for your own benefit. And you eventually bring that whole concept of, defending into your mindset. And later on, when you go and defend your kingdom, killing another living being would not probably be that intimidating effect on you. So maybe that is what we can relate to the concepts of ancient people and how they started these traditions. Next, politics can never be segregated from economics. Now, ruling and military class should not have property. This is what Plato said. He had a very interesting number in his mind, 5040, for an ideal state. He said that if the population goes more than that, you should form a different state, a different territory, a different society. But this was his ideal state. Also, I will tell you, if we sometime get into detail of this, Plato has very interestingly given a very detailed tax structure for the society. And I suppose it was one of the most primitive tax structure which was given by Plato. For value, Plato always said that value is absolute quality inherent in a thing. So he talks about the intrinsic concept that a commodity or a thing has to have an inherent quality, only then it will be valued. Coming to Aristotle, his book, The Politics, he defines a lot on the concepts of politics, and he talks a lot on the other concepts which we are going to use in economics even later on. I would say, or I would try to emphasize that although we always say that Aristotle talked about individualism and Aristotle diverged from Plato, because Plato talked of social welfare, communism, Aristotle talks of individualism. And that individualism is said to have led to the birth of capitalism. But you will very interestingly find that Aristotle never talked of individualism in the sense that we view today. Aristotle said that individual, or you will find that only private property allows for opportunity for moral action to practice virtues of benevolence and philanthropy. So he said that only if, I'll give you an example, which I generally do give in my classroom as well. When a class is there and a teacher is taking the class, suppose there is no class representative and the teacher assigns that I am giving you an assignment, or I'm giving you a particular reading material, and this particular reading material should be distributed in the class, or the attendance for this class is going to be taken. Now, who's going to take it? I am not going to tell one single person who's going to take the attendance. Rather, I leave the responsibility on the whole class. Each individual will probably think the other one is going to do it. In that consequence, what is the resultant? The resultant is that the attendance is not taken. So we need to appoint the class representatives for our classes, either to take the attendance or to distribute the class assignments or to give the reading material. So, and we also hold one particular individual responsible for that particular action or class. So the very same concept Aristotle explains, that if there is some responsibility on me, if there is a moral action or a resultant which is related to me, if I am responsible for something, and if my interest lies in that, only then I'll be able to maximize its benefit. Only then I'll be able to take care of that property. And he also tries to understand and emphasize upon the fact that if every individual starts taking care of their own property, the whole society will be in harmony, probably, because later on you might not, what should I say? You might not agree to this concept of Aristotle, because conflict of interests is always there. It's a very much practical concept, and the same concept which has been, again, I would say, deformed into the extreme form of capitalism, wherein everyone tries to maximize their own profit. But this was not the basic idea of Aristotle or the emergence of capitalism. It was not so. Although agriculture was most desirable and most focused upon, you will see that Aristotle knew that some or the other way trade is going to be a part of it, and the other artisans and other farmers, the tillers, are definitely going to be a very significant part of the society. Aristotle also talked about money as medium of exchange, and he acknowledged that money is a measure of value and a standard of deferred payment. Coming from the Greek thought, we'll come to the scholastics. Now, these were called the schoolmen in general, like we know. Why we say St. Thomas Aquinas is very important, and why I have emphasized, you will understand that Aquinas is one very interesting person who has given a lot of explanation of the medieval thought. It developed, this particular thought developed in Europe during the medieval period. So this medieval ages, like we always say that economics is, or the social science is the resultant of all the activities which are going on, is very much explained by Aquinas himself. He was an Italian Catholic priest. He's also written the book called Summa Theologica. He believed, you have to understand that why he believed in natural law. Like I said, it is historical, social, political influence on a particular person, but it is the way a person is raised, maybe, that he sees the society in a particular way. So Aquinas, coming from this religious background, believed in the natural law. And he believed that, you will also see that usury was never very natural to the society. Even now, you will see he's not very much into the usury part, or he does not promote the loans or the interest. Loans, especially if you're taking interest on that, and if you're earning money out of your money, he says it's against the natural law. You will see that it's very interesting that private property is a desirable economic institution because it complements man's internal desire for order. So you will see how he is following what Aristotle came up with, and how this line of thought is being developed slowly and eventually. Gradually, it will become the concept wherein all of us today are allowed to have private property, and it is not unnatural to have private property. It is not unnatural to think of self-interest today. He said that trade itself is not evil, rather its moral worth depends upon the motive and conduct of the trader. The moral, you will see how these people have been talking a lot about moral and ethics. Okay, because there were this concept of feudalism, all these ideas of people having a lot of land, agriculture being the main supporting system of the society is very much influenced upon. You will see we don't give a lot of credit to Khaldun, but how Adam Smith has taken a lot from Ibn Khaldun, and how he was one of the most learned scholars and most ahead of his time scholars. The concept that he gave, the rise and fall of nations, in his book called Muqaddimah, An Introduction to History, how he emphasizes on government spending less, especially on defense, and shifting the resources to education and human development. He's talking of government, but he's talking of changing or redistribution of allocation of resources. Even now in developing countries, a lot of this idea of Khaldun is adopted. We see that how we try to balance between these two allocation of resources. He opposed taxation and tariffs that discouraged trade and production. He was the first person who has systematically analyzed the functioning of an economy. Importance of technology. Before Khaldun, nobody talked about technology. Specialization and foreign trade in economic surplus. Surplus, nobody talks about till now. Stabilization policies to increase output and employment, prices of goods and services. This last point you see has come up now. Prices of goods and services are determined by supply and demand, is the very interesting and most profound idea of economics that was adopted by classical economists. Then we came to humanism and Reformation. Between these Greek philosophy and rise of mercantilism, there were so many changes in the society that you will find led to a lot of change in concepts of people moving from agrarian society to people moving to trade, change in the ideas, Renaissance taking place, coming of leaders like Martin Luther, coming of finding of scientific discoveries, trade routes, uh, discovery of America, discovery of India, and that was also Spain's golden age. You will see how the starting of colonization is there in this era. Copernicus finds the quantity theory of money for the first time, wherein he talks about the metallic form of money and emphasizes upon how it should be. The metallic form of money should not be surplus in circulation. Till now, nobody has talked about that. Most of the time, we are dealing in barter system. Mercantilism during the 17th and 18th century. Till now, we had church as the supreme power which took decisions on people's behalf, and people were afraid. Henry VIII seized the church power, established Church of England. People started talking more about human behavior, humanism, giving focus to the human perspectives, individual perspectives. Renaissance, of course, played a very important, significant role. You will see a lot of changes and forms of art. The paintings of Renaissance, the art and culture, you will see writings, paintings, poetry. There was so much different. It moves from God to human-centric, from one God, from the Almighty, to most material concepts. How this whole concept of superior, supreme power, which is, beyond us, we can't see, that whole concepts of spiritualism, which later on again comes back when Hegel talks about spiritualism, but then is now shattered over here, and people are moving to more material and human well-being form. Reformation and Protestantism. Now, Protestantism was, this was a very, very important part of religious movement. And you will see Europe transforming vehemently, and there was so much growing and going on at that time that many people have said that also there was so much at that time bloodbath and changes in ideas, art, culture, so many things going on, that many said that it was slowly crawling into the dark ages. It led also to economic nationalism, which generally we talk mercantilism as. Mercantilism is also said economic nationalism because of the concepts of protectionism that it follows. Favorable. Now, favorable balance of trade, we know that in mercantilism, we talked more about, we putting a restriction to imports and exporting more and getting in more foreign gold and precious metals. So that's kind of economic nationalism. We are trying to expand our boundaries by doing more and more trade. We are protecting our boundaries by having more of, you will see how the corn laws in Britain were very much strictly imposed, and that also promoted the domestic industries. And by corn laws, corn at that time in Britain meant all the food grains, wheat, barley, corn, everything. Now, the mercantile system served the interest of merchants and producers, such as the British East India Company. We know that, all of us. Who better than Indians, whose activities were protected or encouraged by the states? The concept of metallic money was prevalent, and it was flowing so much. The famous mercantilists that we talk about, of course, William Petty, Cantillon, Hume, Munn, they were very famous. Now, after this, you will also find at times, very interestingly, Colbert coming up and trying to somehow criticizing mercantilism, and very interestingly, he's called neo-mercantilist. After the mercantilism, we come to the concept which slowly developed in physiocracy. Now, why physiocracy and why mercantilism came to an end? It was flourishing, it was very well, and you will also understand, being a student of either history or economics, you will find that physiocracy was very short-lived. Why was it short-lived, and why was it important? Physiocrats were the one who were called who called themselves the economists. They were probably the first very formal group of economists. You will see that how physiocrats, because physiocrats were a group of French thinkers, French philosophers, and they were also, you will see Quesnay, who is supposed to be the father of physiocracy, was himself a very rich and very famous feudal lord. He had lots of land at his disposal. And due to rise in extremist ideas of mercantilism, trade was so much prevalent everywhere that France as an economy was going down. Now, why it was going down? Because France had a competitive advantage in agriculture. When it was an agriculture-based economy. And we all know that if you have an advantage in one particular sector, you definitely should exploit that sector for the benefit of your economy, for the benefit of your society, but that was not happening. So in retaliation of extreme mercantilist ideas, physiocracy grew, it rose. And Quesnay and people like Quesnay, Mirabeau, and you will see they came up with ideas and they formed a model, a proper model of the economy, three-sector model of the economy for the first time was made by Quesnay in Tableau Economique. And that is where the basic modeling of economics comes up. So the models of economics that we now know also in national income, when we calculate the various sectors and understand the modeling, we should probably always credit Quesnay to that. Now, we all know the rise of physiocracy was because of extravagant court style. The mercantilists were very powerful till that time. They had most of the resources, but they were paying very less tax. Mercantilism was in its ruins, and it was ruining the culture of societies as well. Agriculture was neglected because nobody paid a heed to it. Existence, because of all these factors, we will know that there was socioeconomic inequality, and Tableau Economique was one book that Quesnay came up with and is said to be one formal book of economics, the first formal book of economics wherein he talks about various economic models. The classical thought after that. Adam Smith, you will find, was very much influenced by the physiocrats. Adam Smith was a philosopher. And Adam Smith, you will see, and likewise, like I said, that since beginning, if we are talking about economics, we are basing everything on the moral sentiments, the philosophies, the ethics of how human behave. If we are talking about these things, we should understand that even today in all economic theories, we assume that consumer is rational. And this concept of rationality comes from the ethical behavior, from the moral behavior since ancient times. It was very much influenced by mercantilist doctrines, physiocracy as the Enlightenment. Physiocracy was, and he was very much influenced by Turgot. He was very much influenced by Mirabeau. And also you will see that Adam Smith talks about free trade. He talks about trade. But also you will see that he talks about classical liberalism. There was industrial revolution, which was also to be a factor on the rise, which led to the rise of classical economics. You have to understand how all these factors are working simultaneously to bring one particular school of thought to rise. Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Malthus, and Mill. Smith is supposed to be the father. We generally say father of economics, but what I generally found after understanding history of economic thought is that Adam Smith was merely one person who tried to collaborate all the ideas which were already prevalent in the society earlier and brought up one particular piece under economics and said that this is the wealth of nations, an inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nations. Thereby, we say that all these ideas for the first time, which were here and there in the society, being adopted, being followed by various nations, various societies, various schools of thoughts, but not compiled in one book, streamlined, became streamlined by Adam Smith. Now he came up with various ideas. We all know that he talks about free trade, he talks about market forces of and how prices are determined, demand and supply, all of that. Adam Smith came up with the idea, but Ricardo is said to be the person who has found and led the ideas into the rolling motion. Ricardo and Malthus were contemporary. Malthus was his father was from church, and then Malthus was a very firm believer in the ideas, and he was a very believer in church. Ricardo, at the other hand, was from a very rich family, and he was from a very Muslim family, and his father. There are very interesting stories about Ricardo and Malthus, how both of them met once and they talked about the various concepts of economics going on, because both of them were members of the parliament at that time.
Niharika ma'am, sorry to interrupt.
Yes, please.
This is Teresa here from the Department
Yes,
of Economics. Ma'am, we have another 5 minutes for the talk, and followed by the question and answer session.
All right, I'll just wind up. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let me just wind up quickly. There were a lot of debates between Malthus and Ricardo about how policy issues were there related to corn laws. Malthus was in favor of corn laws, which were protecting the domestic industries. Ricardo was in favor of free trade, influenced by Adam Smith. And they talk about surplus or glut in the economy, wherein Malthus's concept of glut later on became the basis of deficiency in demand. We also say Malthus were two major protagonists in the question about the existence of a surplus and its effects on a market economy. You will also find that there was very interesting relationships between Ricardo, Malthus, James Mill, who was father of John Stuart Mill. James Mill also was a historian. John Stuart Mill was the son of James Mill, and he was very much influenced by Ricardo. He was very much influenced by Jeremy Bentham. And later on, when John Stuart Mill went into severe depression and broke down at some point in his life after, I suppose, 21 years, I think he was 21 years of age when he went into severe depression. Then James Mill came in touch later on with Auguste Comte, and as we all know that Comte was related to the concept of positivity, he regained from there, and later on, it's all history how John Stuart Mill came up with brilliant ideas, and he became one of the most important classical economists. Socialism, we relate to Sismondi and Karl Marx. Always we try to, sometimes, we try to substitute one term with another, wherein we try to substitute socialism with communism or Marxism. Marxism in special, because we always try to identify socialism or communism with only Marxism, but these are very different terms. You will also find that Sismondi is the person who tries to talk about socialism in the general way that we know today. How you will understand that, Sismondi talks about class conflict much before Karl Marx talks about class conflict. He talks about peasant farming, and he also talks about how they are being, overburdened. He talks about overproduction, Karl Marx concept. Karl Marx talks about materialism, in a retaliation to the concept of spiritualism given by Hegel, wherein again you will see that Hegel talks about one God and God is the king, and Karl Marx comes back and says that it is the humans that we need to concentrate upon. So it is the materialism in that sense, not capitalism materialism, that we try to relate to. We also know that till now we have been talking about morals, ethics, what's happening in the society. With the coming up of neoclassical, you find that a lot of mathematics comes into the being, wherein the neoclassical gets a lot with the emergence of econometrics, statistics, how they get to prove their ideas which they were propounding with the marginal revolution. You will also see how Friedman is very much responsible for coming up of the mathematics. The marginalist school is also called the neoclassical. We know that Marshallian, Walras, Austrian, Stockholm, they have the same underlying theoretical principles. Now we all know that till 30s, we have been following free trade and we've been following all of that, the last remnant of classical schools. Neoclassicals won a complete and final victory over the institutionalists in the 1930s. Now you will see that econometrics and economics analysis has completely taken over, and we are done with the morals and ethics of economics. Post-war, the economics glides onwards to two rails. Neoclassicism rules, micro and macroeconomics. We all know that Keynes has been the major influence in the macroeconomics after that. After the Great Depression, we know that we've been following Keynes very strictly. Now, Cambridge School, led by Robinson, proposed that neoclassical theory should be dumped altogether and classical theory should be, regained or revitalized. Another group, which is the Chicago or the monetarists led by Friedman, proposed to dump Keynesian theory altogether and let neoclassicism take over the macro side again. So now you see again coming up of different ideas and dumping of the older schools. There it proves little or no tolerance for Keynesian ideas. And the analysis of Keynes. How much time am I left with, Trija ma'am? 2 minutes?
Yes, ma'am, another 2 minutes.
Thank you. All right. So you will see, I am not going to emphasize on this. Theoretical tools and mathematical tools are in a war right now. It has started already since this neoclassical and monetarists. Monetarists have been talking a lot about using of mathematical tools, using of econometrics, using of all these ideas. We've used a lot of mathematics. We are using a lot of the tools of statistics and mathematics, so much so that we have forgotten the concepts of behavior or of consumer, of psychology. How all this, we simply say that a person is going to behave rationally, but on what account? When you read the game theory, does all the resultant behavior, all the strategy is dependent on people behaving? Do all these depend upon only people behaving rationally? If so, aren't we mistaken? Aren't we forgetting something? Aren't we missing a particular thread? Wherein we are trying to forget to analyze the behavior of a consumer, making a very simple assumption that this is all rational behavior, and I expect, like I would say that I expect all my students not to cheat during the exam, and I'm going to close the door and go away. Is this what I'm supposed to do? No. As an economist, not at all. Now, behavior, with the emergence of behavioral economics, we all know that after the times Professor Daniel won the Nobel Prize, we all have again started understanding and becoming more interested in the rise of behavioral economics, how psychology has started playing more and more role. So thankfully, this is my last slide. So how behavior is trying to, or behavioral economics is trying to manipulate us or trying to manipulate the world working off of the economy, we need to understand in more depth all these concepts. Even for the financial markets, it says it's all the moral sentiments. It's not your calculation. Where does your calculation come in? Where the moral sentiments are there. So we need to understand the layers of human psychology. Only then we will understand the concept of economics and consumer behavior and analysis in a better way. Advocating, not neglecting or not dumping the use of mathematics, but advocating more use of concepts, more use of psychology, more use of history and sociology in economics, and understanding and interpreting the numbers is what is required today of economists. And we can trace every behavior of ours today to the ancient times. And if I get another chance to someday maybe interact with you, I can talk more extensively on how every behavior or every concept today is related back to the moral sentiment and philosophy of ancient times. With this, I really thank you all for being so patient with me. I know I've exceeded time limit. I'm very sorry about that. But thank you so much, Anita ma'am. Thank you, Teresa ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Niharika. That was beautifully put, very informative. And I, as an economics student, I learned so much from your talk. I remember my first class ever in Joseph's for economics. The professor told me Adam Smith is not the founder or the father of economics, and I never understood why. But today it has been put into so much perspective, to a clear thought process you have given us. You started the talk with the Hindu and Hebrew societies, and you ended with the rise of behavioral economics, and that was a beautiful way to explain the theoretical side of economics. And I understood how to. I also understood to differentiate between the economic history and the history of economic thought. I also understood that economics is not just related to money, it's not just related to policies, it is also a result of all the activities that surround us, like the cultural factors, political factors, historical factors, and sociological events that take place. Economics is not just confined just to a few schools of thoughts. It goes way beyond that. It is related to different religions, different ethics, and theories on morality, like you mentioned. There is definitely a connection between each thought and what it was before and what it is today in our lives. You threw a light on how the theoretical side of economics and the mathematical side of economics is at war right now, and how we try to forget the theoretical side of economics, and that we shouldn't. Thank you, ma'am. That was beautiful. Now, Professor Teresa Joy, I kindly request you to coordinate the Q&A, question and answer session. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening to all. I have a couple of interesting questions which I received from the chat box. Niharika ma'am, so the first question to you is, why do you think socialism failed as an economic system?
One of my favorite interesting topics. So why did socialism fail? You can attribute it to the political ideas. One thing which we must understand is that socialism is something which was adopted much after Karl Marx's death. And Marx himself was one person who gave this idea that we socialists, we leftists, as we all know today, that we leftists or we Marx communists try to come up with very good, counterpoints, which we say. they were very good critics. Left were always very good critiques. They still are. You will see that left is one of the most interesting and sought after people or party in opposition. They'll come up with very good ideas. But Karl Marx himself has said that philosophy till now, or philosophers till now, thinkers till now, have always come up with the ideas. They have come up with the problems. We need to deal with solutions now. We need to come up with solutions. You will see that leftists, especially, will not always come up with solutions. And what I also felt, that socialism, if taken to an extreme level, because it is a collective effort, like always Plato did. Plato always took it to a very extreme level wherein, remember he said that even the wives and children of these people should be in a common platform. And if you have a family of your own, that would probably lead to a distorted interest. So this is what I find. You take any country today, it is not completely social. It is not following socialistic form. And that is one reason maybe they don't fit into the present norms of society, wherein capitalism is a very important part. And also, maybe socialism has not been taken in proper spirits like it was supposed to be by Marx, with no proper solution coming up, maybe. That's my take. I mean, you can have a different take on that. There are very interesting articles why socialism failed in EPW. EPW has very interesting and good articles. Teresa, ma'am, that's my answer.
Yes. Ma'am, we have another question. Can you please throw some light on economic thought of Harappan and Mesopotamian civilization?
Harappa and Mesopotamian civilizations, again, I would say, Harappan civilization is the Indus Valley civilization, which is very similar to the concepts of the ancient Hindu society that we've already learned. They were much primitive in thought, and they were also what I would say the primitive or in the nascent stage of society formation. Like you will see that Marx has explained that there are various stages of society which is formed. So this primitive or nascent stage of society in which the Mesopotamian or the Indus Valley civilization was prevalent was again agriculture based, because both of them were near rivers. Both of them relied on agriculture. Both of them, you will see, emphasized a lot on the natural law. And when I say natural law, they also worshipped a lot of nature. You will see it was always there. So you will see a lot of similarity between them and the ones that we have learned in ancient Hindu and Hebrew thought.
All right, ma'am, another question. Who, according to you, should be the father of economics, if not Adam Smith?
That's a very interesting question, but I cannot, tell you. Say if I say that maybe Ibn Khaldun or maybe Saint Thomas Aquinas is the father of economics, will he become the father of economics? No, he will not. So it is not in my jurisdiction to comment upon that. But you can trace it back to many other significant, important philosophers which gave various ideas. So rather than, I am very sorry, but rather than, coming up with a single person as your father of something, like father of nation or father of subject, we can maybe dedicate certain ideas to certain school of thought or certain people.
All right. Yeah. So I think I have another question here. Now, how do you think COVID-19 will change economic thought for the years to come?
COVID-19 is actually, using maybe what all the papers there are. As we all know, there are a number of thousands and thousands of papers, research papers written in COVID-19. But what I feel that COVID-19 has tried to use some experimental part. the experimental economics that Professor Abhijit Banerjee has come up with. Maybe we can use, or maybe the concept of experimental economics is going to gain a lot of importance now. This is what I feel. But yes, now that we are trying to revive the theoretical concepts of economics, maybe with rise of behavioral, and I see a lot of people giving a lot of importance to behavioral concepts, maybe we can revive this theoretical idea.
Yes, ma'am. I'm moving to the last question. Do you think theoretical economics is under threat in today's capitalistic world?
Not only capitalistic world, Teresa ma'am, I would say that theoretical economics has been under threat, even since before the mathematical school, or maybe even Milton Friedman came up with the concepts of arguing extremely in favor of use of mathematics in economics. I also feel that use of basic ratio and proportion is enough in economics. But as we know that it's nowadays undue importance is given to mathematics for every for proving of every concept. It is definitely under threat, and it has been there not only with the rise of capitalism. It's actually not related to the rise of capitalism at all.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for answering the questions from our inquisitive learners in the audience. Thank you very much, ma'am. I hand over to Seenu.
Thank you, Teresa ma'am. Now I invite Professor Keshav Murthy to give the vote of thanks. Keshav sir, kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. The chief guest for today, Dr. Um, Niharika Singh, Professor Clement D'Souza, the Vice Principal of the Arupe Block, Professor Anita Norona, the Head of the Department of Economics, and my dear esteemed colleagues, Professor Teresa and Professor Raiza, Professor Padmaja, Professor Tulika, and Dr. Nikhil, and my dear participants. I consider this it's my privilege to have been asked to propose the vote of thanks. At the outset, on behalf of the Department of Economics, I would like to thank for the principal, Father Victor Lobo, the registrar, and Dr. Melvin Colosso for encouraging us to conduct this webinar. And a big thank you for Niharika Singh, who is also our good friend, for accepting our invitation and delivering this very interesting lecture. Thank you, Dr. Niharika Singh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keshav sir. Thank you so much. And thank you, Anita ma'am.
I also wish to express my gratitude to Professor Clement D'Souza for gracing the occasion here. So thank you very much, sir. In spite of your busy schedule, you are here with us, encouraging to conduct the webinar successfully. Thank you very much, sir. And I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for Professor Anita, who is coordinating having taken the responsibility of organizing this webinar. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your support and encouragement. Thanks a lot, ma'am, Anita, ma'am. And yeah, I also would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our student team, especially the technical team, which is headed by Mr. Neeraj, who is our student, and Miss Sara, who is emceeing the program, and the entire student team who have been behind the scenes and working on the successful completion of the webinar. And my heartfelt thanks to Professor Teresa also for conducting the question and answer session successfully. And finally, I would like to place on record our heartiest thanks to all the participants across the country for giving us time and taking part in the webinar. So thank you all once again. Thank you for participating in the event. and we look forward for your continued support and encouragement. Thank you all. Thank you. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Keshav sir. That was really nice of you to do that for us.